Welcome to the Private Practice Journeys podcast, where mental health professionals learn about the nuts and bolts of private practice by listening to the journeys of 4 therapists that have taken the plunge into private practice. And here's your host, Chris Quarto.
Hey everyone, are you ready for this? The launch of the Private Practice Journeys podcast series. I am so glad that you joined me. I'm Chris Quarto, the host. Well, I talked a little bit about this series last week. In case you didn't hear it, this is a series that tracks the journeys of 4 therapists who are either launching private practices or expanding their private practices. And with a lot of podcasts that are out there nowadays, the host will interview one therapist a week, which is what I did on my Make a Mental Note podcast series. But I wanted to go for depth as opposed to breadth with the Private Practice Journeys podcast series. So this series is going to be, once again, following 4 therapists throughout the course of 2017. I'm going to be interviewing them once a month to find out what it's like to actually go into private practices and the challenges that they experience and what they've learned from month to month, so you can benefit from that. So if you want to start a private practice or expand from perhaps individual to group practice, you'll learn about the nuts and bolts of doing these things by listening to these podcast episodes. So today is the first therapist who is participating with me, Cindy Norton. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and just start the podcast, my interview with her. And at the very end of the interview, make sure you listen, because I have a few important things to say about how you can get even more out of this podcast series. So without further ado, here's Cindy. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of Private Practice Journeys. I'm your host, Chris Quarto. Okay, well, today I'm honored and excited to interview the first of the 4 therapists, Cindy Norton. And Cindy, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. And how about if you start off by sharing with the Journey followers a little bit about who you are and what you do for a living?
Okay. I live in Asheville, North Carolina with my partner, John. Mm-hmm. And at my previous job, I worked for the state of North Carolina in the Human Services Department for about 10 years.
All right.
And then I ended up, wanting to change careers. And I'm currently at a school, working at a school as a school-based therapist at an agency here in Asheville, and I started that last January.
Wow.
And this is my first month of going, stepping into private practice. I just opened my office. It'll be this Saturday. So
wow.
It's, brand new to me.
How exciting is that?
Yes, very exciting and scary.
I bet. And I want to talk about that as well. But let me just ask you a little bit, because some of the Journey followers might not be familiar with what a school-based therapist is. Maybe you can describe to them what you do in that role.
Okay, yeah. Well, I work for an agency, and we are contracted with the different school districts in Buncombe County, where I live.
All right.
And we just provide outpatient therapy services. So basically, it's a lot easier for us to meet with the kids at school. That way, the parents don't have to worry about transportation issues or getting them to their appointments on time or them missing school. So it's basically just outpatient therapy served in the schools, and I'm currently at a high school.
Oh, I see. Okay. So it's not a school counselor, because they would have kind of a different role. You're just going into the schools to provide the therapy services, and that's pretty much it.
Yes. We work closely with the school counselors. We receive referrals from the school counselors.
Okay.
Because they may see kids that need more, like a higher level of care, and someone that they need to meet with weekly, and so they will refer them to us, and we will provide those therapy services there at school.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm always interested in hearing about therapist stories, about how they became interested, just kind of going into the helping profession in general. and then what got them thinking about private practice. So I want to start off maybe by having you talk a little bit about how you decided just to go into the helping profession. What's your story, Cindy?
Okay. Mine's a little bit different from most people's that I've heard on other podcasts. A lot of people will say that they knew at a young age that this is what they wanted to do, and that
I was one of them.
I really didn't know. I remember just when I was doing a little internship in high school, I just happened to do that internship with an accountant.
Okay.
So I was like, well, I know I want to go to college, so I'll just major in accounting. So I went to college, majored in accounting just because I knew I wanted to get a higher degree, but I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. About halfway through the program, the accounting classes were really difficult, and I thought, well, maybe I should do something a little more broad. So I changed it to business management because I could still graduate on time, and it's not like I was changing to a whole nother program.
Right.
So I ended up getting my degree in business management. And after I graduated, I couldn't find a job. So I went back to work at the mall for a little while doing retail, ended up going to a temp agency, and that's how I ended up with a job working for the state. And it was an awesome job. But after about 8 or 10 years, I found myself, I was a processing assistant. We had good benefits, not great money, but it was a good job. And
right.
I just found myself wanting something more. And there for about maybe a few months, I was just thinking, this thought just kept coming into my mind. I just really want to help people. And so I didn't know where that was going. And then one day I just started researching online. Okay, well, counselors help people. Maybe I could do this. And then it was almost like an inner knowing. It was in my late 20s. I just thought, I need to do something different. I need to help people. And just I just started searching on the internet, looking at different counseling programs. And as soon as I saw the marriage and family therapy program, I thought, I want to be a couples therapist in private practice. And it just popped into my head, and that's, what I wanted to do. That's really interesting. And I can't explain how it happened. It's just, I knew that this is what the rest of my path was going to be. Yeah.
I think it's really fascinating because you're right. There are some people, and like I said, I was one of them, who knew from a young age that, this is what I want to do. I want to help people. And but others have no clue. And there are people like you, because I've talked to other therapists as well about their stories like you, who kind of went into a totally different field at first, not really knowing anything about counseling, and but not really being fulfilled in the field that they were in and wanting something more. And just by the virtue of kind of going through the experience of not being fulfilled in their current job, they started searching out other possibilities. Now, some people will talk to friends or family members. Sounds like you got on the internet and did a little bit of research that way and kind of discovered some things. But isn't that interesting how you finally came about and are doing something now that you enjoy, that you really probably have more of a passion for, right?
Yeah, I do. And I think that a big part of it is just looking around and seeing how important our intimate partner relationships are, and looking at my own parents' relationship. I mean, they're amazing parents. Yeah. And just being able to see that, and I want to help people with that and help people to have those really great relationships, because it affects everyone around them, especially their children. Right. And just going through some of the relationships that I have in the past, it's just always been really interesting to me, and just helping people to make those work, because they're a big part of our life. That's right. I agree.
Well, at some point in time, Cindy, most therapists think about what it might be like to go into private practice. And some end up going that route and others don't. But you're one of those people who decided to take the plunge, so to speak. So what was it that attracted you to private practice?
Well, initially, And my story is a little bit different from others who have worked as a counselor or therapist for a few years and then decide that they want to go into private practice. Like I knew before I even enrolled in grad school that I want to be in private practice.
Ooh,
and I don't know if it was because of my background, with my degree in business management or what that was, but I never, I knew that I would work for an agency for about 1 to 2 years following, my graduation just to get that experience. But it was never my long-term plan.
Right.
So that's been a little different. But the main things that attracted me to private practice now that I'm thinking about it, one is the fact that I really want to specialize, because sometimes it can be difficult working for an agency because you work with, every client that comes through the door, no matter what type of mental health concern they have.
Jack of all
and
trades.
It can be a little bit overwhelming because I feel like I have the ability to work with most of them, but not be like amazingly trained in every one of these areas.
Exactly.
So it can be a little bit overwhelming. So just the ability to specialize in just couples issues, I think it would make me feel more competent. And so that's one. And the second is because I'm a highly sensitive person, I like the idea of, having fewer clients, being able to schedule them more time in between, and not feel like I'm just, seeing as many people as I can during the day. And of course, the business side. I enjoy marketing and working on my website and doing the social media things, writing a blog. So that's something that you need in private practice. You have to, also have that business sense.
That seems to be a real advantage for you, Cindy, that you had that background, the educational background of business, and really, but not knowing at that point in time how it might help you in the future. That's so amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, I had no idea why I was decided to major in that, but it's been very helpful.
That's fantastic. So so you kind of knew, though, when you started I think you said marriage and family therapy program, you kind of knew when you were going into that private practice was the thing that you wanted to do. And so it sounds like and how long ago did you get your degree, by the way?
I have been at this for a long time.
All right.
I think that the story about the tortoise and the hare, I'm definitely the tortoise.
Okay.
But I began at Capella University in 2009, and I ended up choosing them. I was a little bit nervous about choosing an online program for a counseling or therapy degree. But after doing my research, it is an amazing university. They are, I think at the time, they were one of the very few online universities that had the KCREP and the COAMSCI accreditations. And so that was really awesome. And it just seemed like a really good program. And it was something that I wanted to do part-time. So I searched around, and the land-based schools were at least 2.5 hours away from Asheville. And I knew I did not want to leave Asheville. I knew I didn't want to travel back and forth. I wanted to keep working at my job full-time to pay for school. So that was another deciding factor in me choosing Capella. But I graduated in 2015, so I was there for 6 years. So their program is pretty intense, and I think it's pretty highly regarded in the marriage and family therapy field. If you go full-time, it'll take about 3.5 years, which is a little longer than most programs. But I went part-time, so I didn't feel overwhelmed at my job and all of that. And so I could let the information sink in a little bit more and not feel so rushed with it. So it took me a total of 6 years. So 5 years of classes and a year-long internship at the end.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I ended up with, I think, 99 credit hours,
Holy
which is
cow.
a really, intensive program. So I think it prepared me really well, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that I was able to go online and still work. So it worked best for my situation.
Exactly. That's wonderful. Yeah, I think Capella was one of the very first programs that got that accreditation, as I recall. And now you see a lot of those programs, coming online, which is really cool. It's nice that there are programs like that to provide flexibility, because some people need that kind of flexibility. So it's nice to hear that you benefited from that. Well, I'm not sure everyone realizes how much preparation goes into starting or expanding a private practice. So why don't you share with the Journey followers how you went about doing this, and perhaps what types of resources helped you in the process, Cindy?
Okay. Well, since I knew that I wanted to go into private practice, I was researching it probably about the 2 years before I graduated. I was, reading different blogs, and there are so many that really helped me. I hope I don't leave anyone out, but there's, of course, the Zinni-Me and the Practice of the Practice, All Things Private Practice. There are a lot of these different blogs and everything that really helped me just to read about what it's like to be in private practice and give me some ideas about how I want to, design mine. So that started before I graduated. So as soon as I graduated, as you know, you have to wait for your license.
Right.
So I graduated in June of 2015, and the earliest that I would be able to get my license would be October 2015.
All right.
So during those few months, while I was waiting on my license, I identified a business name. I used Canva and created my own logo, and then I registered my business as a sole proprietorship. And the reason I chose sole proprietorship is because I'm not fully licensed yet. And so in North Carolina, I can't become a PLLC until I have my full license. So right now I'm a sole proprietor.
All right.
Yeah. And I obtained my employer identification number, I designed my website, and I began writing blogs, created some social media accounts, and opened up a business checking account. And I'm sure there's more, but that's kind of the list of the things that I worked on during those few months while I was waiting for my license.
Holy cow. I've got to imagine that there are Journey followers who are listening to this just totally overwhelmed, thinking, how do I know how to do all this? How did she know how to do all that? And, but you did your research, didn't you?
Yeah, all of this, none of this came to me naturally. It's a ton of research. Even designing my website, someone else probably could have done it in a few days, but I worked on it for months. I would work 8 or 10 hours a day. I would watch tons of different tutorials. Just one simple thing I wanted to change on it, I would Google how to do that, find a YouTube tutorial, watch it. Some of them may be 30 minutes long. And just so it was a slow go, but I just wanted to do it myself so I could teach myself. So in the future, I'll know how to do that and save myself money in the long run.
And I think that's a wise thing, actually, because in private practice, you do have to keep an eye on finances, and especially I think when you're first starting out, there are a lot of things that you have to do yourself, whether it's website design or whatever the case may be. And so it does. It takes a lot of effort and persistence and motivation to do those types of things. And it certainly sounds like you have all those covered. So.
Yeah.
Well, I imagine
there may be some things I'm forgetting, but.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that's with all of us. I think there's always something more to learn and something that you can do to enhance your practice. And that's why this is called a journey. Well, I imagine that, there are a lot of thoughts that go through your head and emotions that you experience when you think about going into private practice, and you're making those final preparations to actually do it. Well, talk about what that was like for you, Cindy.
Oh, well, these, my thoughts and emotions, they kind of range from extreme excitement to almost being paralyzed with fear. I mean, it runs the gamut. And I think that's kind of what's expected of people, going out on their own and not having that, that security of just your regular 9-to-5 job working for someone else.
Right.
So it is definitely scary. And I know that I'm going to be having, that these are going to continue because it's just kind of how life is. It has its ups and downs, and
Right, exactly. So what is your plan at this point? You're a school-based therapist. You're starting this practice, and you're just starting this one day a week. Is that correct?
yes, yes, I'll be opening up on Saturdays this month. So my plan was to work for an agency for 1 to 2 years.
All right.
Just so I could accumulate some more hours toward my full licensure, because in North Carolina we have what's called an associate license.
All right.
So I have my license, but it's considered a provisional license, so I'm an LMFTA. And once I obtain all my hours, then the A falls off.
Okay.
So I'm under supervision, but in North Carolina you can open up your own practice as an associate licensed therapist, as long as you're still under, your supervision and everything.
I see. So who do you plan on seeing on Saturdays? Who would your clientele be?
Well, I've completed specialized training in Gottman Method couples therapy, and I want to specialize on relationships. So couples for just couples counseling or premarital counseling, or individuals that want to work on relationship issues. So that could be someone who is, because, sometimes in couples, one person may see there's a problem, the other person is like, no, I think everything's fine. Or it may be one person don't want to come to a couples therapy, but they also don't want to get divorced.
Right.
So I may work with the one person that's interested. Or it may be someone recovering from a breakup, or someone that has had bad relationships in the past and wants to prepare for a better relationship in the future. So really any type of relationship issues, but mainly focused, I'll be working from the Gottman method.
Okay. Well, if I were listening to this and I hadn't been in private practice, but I was kind of interested in doing it, the thing that would come into my head right now is, okay, well, she wants to do this couples work on Saturdays, but how is she going to get her clients? I mean, how is she going to get a couple to come in to see her? So what's the plan along those lines, Cindy?
Okay. Well, I think that networking in your local therapist community is so important. So, 7 years ago when I began grad school, I found a therapist group that meets monthly. And so it's where a local therapist will come and present on a topic, and we'll get free CEUs. And you just get to meet other therapists in the area, find out their specializations. And once I told people, what I was planning on doing, they're like, oh, well, I don't work with couples, so I'll definitely send you referrals. So just keeping in contact with those people, that's, I think, one of the most important things, because a lot of times individuals will go to therapy, and then you find out that the therapist may find out, oh, well, they've got some relationship issues, and they may refer to a couples therapist. So that's one of the things.
I see.
I also think that having a website and writing my blog is very important, because I just have a lot of, great information in the blogs about couples issues, and of course have my social media accounts and all of that. I just opened up my Psychology Today profile a week or so ago, and so it's just, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I've done to kind of help clients get in the door as I begin.
Well, really,
I'm not expecting a flood of clients, because sometimes it may be months before you have your first client, or you may get someone the first or second week. So I don't really have any specific expectations for that, but I'm ready whenever the clients are ready.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you have a couple of different strategies here. One is the networking. So developing, isn't it, I think that you would agree with this, it's so important to develop relationships. I mean, that's what this field is all about, is relationships, whether it's with clients or fellow therapists. And in your case, I think from this standpoint, developing those networking relationships are just essential. And I think the other thing is that you're just trying to get the word out, and it sounds like you're big on using social media to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoy, my Facebook page is probably where I'm most active, and I really enjoy that. And just, I'll share my blog posts, or just interesting articles, or just funny little comics about couples. And And so it seems to be helpful, and I enjoy having that. That's probably my favorite social media.
Okay. Well, Cindy, what's been the primary challenge at this point in your journey to starting your practice? What's been that, if you can kind of look at everything that you've done so far, what's been the biggest challenge in doing this?
Well, I think in the beginning, it's my own mind.
Okay. Say a little bit more.
You have these doubts, and like I mentioned, where you have the emotions that range from being really excited
Yes.
to just being really fearful. And sometimes it's just telling yourself that you can do this, that things are going to work out, because there's so many unknowns. And I'm someone who's a planner, and I like to know what's going to be going on in the future. And with this, you have to relinquish control of that. So that's been a little difficult, just talking myself into continuing on this journey.
Right.
And just knowing that there's going to be ups and downs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I
know that there... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I suspect that, you have to have a lot of faith in yourself to continue doing this with, all these unknowns, not having that safety net. I mean, you really do have to have a lot of faith in yourself, don't you?
Yes, you do. I know that there will be newer challenges as I actually get my first client, and just the challenges of, am I doing the right kind of marketing? How am I going to make sure that I'm full? And so those are going to be new challenges. But right now, it's just, just challenging your own thoughts.
Exactly. Well, you have these journey followers, graduate students or other mental health professionals. They might be working in agencies who are kind of toying around with the idea of private practice. And maybe you have some words of wisdom that you could pass along to them. If what would you say to them as just kind of something to think about, or a word of wisdom along these lines, Cindy?
Well, I think that once you make that decision to do that, expect that you're going to want to give up many times along the journey. I almost quit before I even started my first grad school class.
Wow.
So this is a little story that I can share. As we spoke about earlier, I decided, this is what I want to do. I'm going to enroll in grad school part-time, take a class at a time, just work toward this. So our classes would start on Monday. So on Friday, I got my first email, and it gives you access to the course room. You can go review everything, see the syllabus, and just like what all you're supposed to be doing. And so I logged in that Friday night. I looked at everything. I got so overwhelmed, and I'm like, I can't do this. Who am I? And all these thoughts started going through my head. Like, oh, I don't have an undergrad degree in psychology. Everyone else in my class is going to have this undergrad degree in psychology, and they're going to be so far ahead of me. And I haven't been in school for 7 years, so I'm not going to be as good as the other people that are in this class, and I'm not going to do very well. And I don't have I haven't been working at a job where I've had any type of, experience in this field. And it was just, I cried myself to sleep that night because I thought that I wouldn't be good enough. Yeah. And I woke up the next morning with, I don't know, a new attitude. And I told myself, well, you've already paid for the class. Why don't you just go ahead and take it? And if you don't do well, then you can say that you've tried. If you do well, then enroll for the next class and just take it one class at a time. Okay. So I ended up doing that, made an A in my first class, and I'm like, okay, I think I can do this, and just kept taking it one step at a time. And as I was getting ready for my internship, I wanted to quit because I was so afraid of meeting with those clients for the first time. It's like, what if I'm not good enough? What if I can't help them? What if I do something wrong? And it was just so nerve-wracking. I almost thought about quitting again. But something is like, you've got to do this. And then, there's been several instances, probably 4 or 5 throughout this journey, where I've seriously thought about, like, I'm not sure I can do this anymore. And I don't know where that comes from, because I know that this is something that I really want. And maybe it's just something showing me how bad I really want it to make me work harder to achieve it. So really my words of wisdom is just to expect this. And so the first time that it happens, don't give up, because it will get better.
Yeah, and I think that I think it's very common to have a lot of those self-doubts, especially if you haven't done something before. It's very easy for those to creep in, and for some people, it just stops them dead in their tracks. It didn't for you. I mean, you decided to keep plodding along, and I think as part of the word of wisdom I heard you say is that you took things one day at a time. And I think that's true of private practice too, Cindy, that in this journey that we've all been on, those of us who have been in private practice, that it really is a one day at a time type of thing, especially when you're first establishing your practice or if you're expanding it. And there are certainly going to be times when things don't work out the way that you want them to. There will be failures, but I'll tell you, looking at my own journey, there have been many more successes than there have been failures. And I think that even with the failures, you can learn from those. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Well, Cindy, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, maybe check out your blog or your website, how could they do that?
Yeah, my website is avlcouplestherapy.com, and I created that name because AVL is like just a cheeky way of saying Asheville, and it's like our airport code here, but it's avlcouplestherapy.com, and you can just click on the blog, and that has a lot of information there. I also have a resources tab that provides a lot of helpful books. I have podcasts listed on there, and links to other blogs that are helpful for couples. So there's a lot of things on there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Cindy, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today and introducing yourself to the Journey followers. I think that this will be a really neat experience, and I can see this as being a real helpful resource for people who are thinking about going into private practice. And so what's really nice about this podcast is, in comparison to my Make a Mental Note podcast, is I don't have to say goodbye to you because I'm going to be talking to you next month, which is going to be really cool.
Yes, definitely.
And we're going to be talking about, what's happened over the month and what types of things that you've learned. And so we'll get into all that kind of stuff when we talk next. So thanks again for coming on the podcast today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Okay. So what did you think? Wasn't that great to listen to what Cindy has done to start her private practice? Man, I learned a lot, just from when I started my practice 25 years ago to how people go about doing this now. I think one of the big things that's changed is social media. Cindy talked about how in preparing for her private practice that she read blogs, she did a lot of investigation of what it's like to start a practice and the business aspects of private practice. But I think that whole social media aspect has really changed a lot, and Cindy's done a really good job creating social media accounts and writing blogs, and I think all this is really important to have a successful private practice. And you know what? Writing blogs is a good example of something that you can do even before you open a private practice, just in preparation for things that you can actually put on your website, and perhaps looking at what is it that I want to perhaps be known for? What's my brand going to be? And how can I write blogs that are centered around that brand? So these are all things that we'll talk about throughout the course of this year with these 4 therapists. Now, I did want to mention something important. Some of you already know this, some of you don't, that there is a Facebook community that goes along with this podcast series. It's called the Private Practice Journeys Facebook community. So if you would like to join that community, just log on to Facebook and just type in Private Practice Journeys community and request to join the community, and I would be happy to approve that request. And what I see us doing in this community is perhaps having conversations about things that were discussed on this podcast series. It doesn't have to be exclusively that, but I'd like to do that. And the 4 therapists are actually going to participate in those discussions. So I think it'll make it much more interactive. It'll give you an opportunity as the listener to feel as though you're a real part of this podcast series. So make sure that you check that out and ask to be approved, to be part of that community. Well, next week we have Amanda Petrick, who's going to be talking about her experiences in preparing for private practice and what that's been like. These podcast episodes will come out on Thursdays. So until then, may your private practice journeys be successful ones.